die. So it's probably going to be really annoying in the tutorial video. Snip every 3 minutes. Alright, so when I'm working on CSS and HTML, I mean, like I've said before, it's really helpful to have them side by side, so that way you can refer to the different elements, the IDs, the classes inside your HTML as you're targeting them and trying to go back and forth and style them. We did a little bit of flexbox with our first section here. Collapse that, you can kind of see that's this part here. Just getting these side by side. If you remember back to what our Wikipedia page looked like, you know that we'll be doing flexbox on our references as well, because they were side by side as well. So that's fine. We're just going to keep going with it. So the same principles we applied up here will apply down here, but let's work top to bottom first. So let's go to our description, our habitat, etc., the rest of the sections. There's not a whole lot we need to do to these other than pick a font and maybe tighten up some of the spacing. Right now we have the exact same amount of space above and below these headers, so it's kind of difficult initially to see them grouped the way that we want to see them grouped. Like description, does it go with this bit of text here, or is it on its own? Habitat, does it go with the text that's above it or below it? You don't know. So you need to visually group things together, and then that, of course, provides context. It's also helpful to maybe make the font size a tiny bit bigger. This is an okay font, but people tend to read, are more comfortable reading with a larger font. Not sure what my font size is. I'm not even sure where to look for that now. Nope. Advanced. Huh. Alt size. Let's check it real quick. Oh, okay. So you're not going to tell me? Oh, well, okay, you can zoom in and out, plus and minus to make it bigger. There's, in most browsers, there's a way to increase the font size, like to set a default font size. And I thought Safari had that too. But I guess not. I guess it uses the system font size, which the system font size is 16, I think. Oh, no, font's moving. That sucks. Yeah. Anyway, it's usually on web browsers anywhere from 16 to 20 is what your default font size will be. We will probably increase that a little bit. This looks a little bigger than that, and if you have a high density screen, so like a Retina screen or something, then that also looks a little bigger. When you're setting, well, we'll find a font too that we like here in a second. I'll show you how to use web fonts. But when you're changing stuff that you want to apply to the entire page, it just makes sense to stick it in the body. If you already have a body element or a body declaration block in your CSS, remember this whole thing is called a declaration block. You've got an element that you open its settings with curly braces and close it with curly braces, and then you have a bunch of characteristics or parameters that you're setting for that element. You're going to want to just stick it up here. So if you want to set your font size to be something specific, then you would just set it in the body. This is going to be the only area where I'm going to recommend actually setting something by pixels, so having a hard setting for this. The rest of the time in your other elements, you're going to want to set it responsively, so it needs to be some variation well, you're going to want to use a responsive unit like a rem or an m. You can use a percentage of viewport width too. I do that for headers. So that way when you scale the page down, the header will scale appropriately down as well, instead of staying gigantic. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So I know that, let's find a font first. Like this is my default web browser font, which is Times New Roman. So we're going to go to fonts.google.com. There are other places to get web fonts, but you have to use web fonts. Okay. You can't just use any font off your computer. Also, it's better to, there's two different ways that you can link a font or provide that font for your user, essentially, because odds are they're not going to have the special font that you've picked for your website. One of them is called linking, which is just putting in an address to a CDN, which is a content delivery network. Okay, it's a server that all they do is they provide all sorts of assets for web pages and stuff. It could be like jQuery or JavaScript libraries, or web fonts, that's really common, or images, like Amazon's tut3 servers and stuff. Those are content delivery networks. If you ever see anything like pbs.timg or .com or .net, if you're like linking to an image, those are just content delivery networks. Imager, IMGUR, they use content delivery network. They kind of are too. So any of those things, like Giphy, they're one too. But anyway, I like to use Google Fonts just because it's odds are if Google goes down, then the whole internet's blown up, and you don't have to you have other things to worry about than whether or not your font is loading on your website. Like, is life ending? That would be one of the things I'd worry about. So they're reliable. They're dependent. You can depend on them. So you can pick any. I mean, there's 5 different types of fonts out there: serif, sans serif, display, handwriting, monospace. Do you guys know what serif and sans serif are? Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, serif have the little things coming off the ends of the letters, right? The little embellishments. So those are serifs. And sans serif, sans just means without. It's Latin for without. Just means without those things. So sans serif tend to be your more modern looking fonts. Like this is a sans serif font. This is a serif. That's also a sans serif. Well, it's kind of a serif font. A little bit. It's ends are a good place to look. Let's see if it stays here. Nope, it goes away. All right, that was a sans serif font. The barcode thing is bizarre. Display fonts are going to have a lot of the weird ones. So barcode things, really embellished fonts. Not the best. They're fine for headers. Okay, doing like picking fonts that look styled. Those are fine for headers. Don't use them for body copy at all, and don't even use them for anything like any small headers. They're just difficult to read. They're difficult to read quickly. Okay, you want to tend to stick to serif or sans serif fonts for body. A tip: sans serif is actually easier for people to read as a body copy than serif fonts because there's more of the letter for the eye to sort of latch onto and interpret quickly. But if you have a certain style you're going for, then by all means pick that right one. Handwriting, that's also going to have a bunch of goofy ones. We're going to turn that off. Monospace fonts, we talked about this when we were setting up Atom. Monospace fonts are every letter, every character are the exact same width and the exact same height, so they can be applied on a grid, right? When we're coding, that's really great. Like everything lines right up, right? Like here's my. If I draw a line right down here, everything lines up, right? Everything is nice on a nice grid. Not the easiest thing to read if you're reading quickly. Not comfortable for long periods of time, but really great for checking formatting, looking for typos, etc., etc. Okay. So I'd also turn those off. So either pick a serif or sans serif font. I'm going to go with, I usually use like Roboto or Open Sans because I'm lazy. Actually, we might use Railway for our header fonts. Nothing is jumping out at me. Okay, we're going to use, Ubuntu. All right, we're going to use Ubuntu. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay, we're going to use Ubuntu for our header. Yeah, did you have a question? Or? Oh, no, it's all right. So one thing that is a good idea to do when you're picking different fonts, So we're going to use Ubuntu for our headers. I don't need to load the entire Ubuntu library. Like I don't need to load all of these different fonts that we see here. Okay, I just need to pick the ones that I want for the application that I'm using them for. And this is to keep your page load times as low as possible, or as fast as possible. Okay, so for a header, I'm probably going to want something a little thicker. So either medium or bold. If you want to, you can pick the italic as well. Although italic headers, not always the best. They can look, it depends on the style, but they can look okay. So anyway, we're going to pick either medium or bold. Going to come up here and hit the plus. This little pop-up will say, hey, you picked this one thing. It'll give you directions on what to load. You can customize what you're loading. Right now, I can see my load time is fast. If I add bold, my load time stays fast. If I start adding the italics, my load time is moderate. So I'm going to take those off. So medium and bold, I'm just going to load those. Or I'm going to grab those, select those under the Customize tab, come over to Embed. Now, a couple different ways to import these or to embed these fonts. Here's our link to our CDN. We would copy this and put it in the header after our CSS sheet, after our link to our CSS sheet. Okay, you don't want to do it before because your CSS hasn't loaded yet, so it doesn't matter if your font's there, right? Your page will just be like, okay, whatever. But so you want to stick it after. Don't stick it in the body because it'll show up on your page, right? So we'll grab it. You can copy it there and link it, and then in your CSS you specify font family Ubuntu in quotes, comma sans serif. This sans serif is just that's backup. Okay, for some reason that the link to Google Fonts is broken, or your user doesn't have the internet on and they've loaded your page, then it'll just whatever sans serif font is the default system sans serif font will load. Does that make sense? So that this last little bit specifying a type is just telling the browser what to use as a backup. Otherwise, it's going to use whatever the default browser font is. So you still have a modicum of control over the styling if things break. The other way to do it that you shouldn't ever do is at import, so you can ignore it. Just do linking. Don't use import. It's old. Or you can download it. There's a little download icon up here. You can download this font and make a font folder in your project, drop it in there, and just link to that font folder. So you would still link the same way, except that this this address here is going to be a little different. Right? It'd be a local link instead. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah?
It'll be a what?
A local link instead of a global link. Does that make sense? Yeah? Is anybody confused about that? We can do it both ways. It's fine. I can show you. There's some redundancy in including the fonts in your project, of course, right? Like, if they've loaded your page, then that means they've loaded your entire directory, which means they have the fonts. Does that make sense? Right? So there's no way that that link will ever break, and it'll be a little bit faster because it's there, but the initial sort of download time might be a little bit more as well. It just depends, right? You can go either way. This keeps your project file size smaller, of course, linking to it. Downloading it increases it because you're adding more to it. So if you're going to have lots of images and things, then it's a trade-off. All right. So this is pretty much the standard way you're going to do is just grab this here, copy it, dump it in your head after your CSS page, save it, and then font family Ubuntu sans serif. Stick that in your body. Font family Ubuntu sans serif. All right, we're gonna load another one. We need a body copy. Let's go with. It's gonna look good with that. Or we'll go with Open Sans. So I'm gonna go regular. I'm gonna add it. You're just adding it so that you can come down here and go to Customize and decide which ones you actually want to grab. I like to include the light for things. I don't know that we need to really with this project. but I do like to include it. It's nice to have the option. Yeah. All right. You can see that it changed our link a little bit. It adds it. So open sans 300, 400, and then there's like a line break there for 500, 700. So you can either copy it again or manually edit the link. So essentially, you just need to make sure that in your link, you've got open sans, your weights 300 and 400, and then Ubuntu and its weights 500 and 700. Okay. And then don't forget to add a font family. Open sans, sans serif, right there. Okay. So 2 places it needs to be. You need to have a link to where the files are in your index, in your header, in your HTML, and then you need to actually specify that you want to use them on the page in your CSS. So now if we load them, it should load, because everything is regular except the headers. Like the headers are a heavier weight. The headers should load. Yeah.
Do you have to put it in your index file? In your index.html?
Yeah.
Why is mine showing up and I still put it just in my CSS?
You just put it. Well, it's not. It's loading whatever the default sans serif font is. It's probably Helvetica.
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you have that font installed with sans here?
No. Yeah, I downloaded that one too.
Oh, you did?
There's a little bit of
Oh, I see. You definitely don't have this installed.
Definitely don't have that.
That's just so weird. Turn off your Wi-Fi. No, don't turn it back on. Leave it off. Awesome. You must have it installed. No. That's so weird. I don't know. It's crazy. I don't know. That's weird. I didn't post that. Usually that shouldn't work. I don't know how it's working. Try it in Chrome. Like open the page in Chrome and see if it still works.
Is this Chrome?
Try Safari. Sorry, I'm just like baffled that that's working. Normal wisdom would say, no, that shouldn't work. Did it load in? It load. Yeah? Nuts. All right. Weird. All right. Let me test it. Let me see if I can take that link out. I mean, it shouldn't have worked. Take the link out and reload. Still works for me. Huh. That is so bizarre. I don't know what's going on there. I really don't understand that. Okay, well, I guess right now it's optional whether or not to put that link in. I'm going to say please go ahead and put the link in just because I know that it's redundancy. Like, it's not going to hurt anything to put the link in, and it's going to cover any sort of weird cases where that doesn't work. I don't know why that is working. Now I have to figure that out. Table styles. Yep, okay. JavaScript. Table extensions. Site-specific hacks. Local file restrictions. Cross-origin restrictions. Nope. Wow. Weird. Yeah, I got nothing. I don't know why that's working. I'll look into it. There's got to be something about CSS3 that I missed.
What is it that we've done so far that makes it know that the header is like the heavier font weight than the body?
Because we made them H3s. And so by default, it knows that the H tags are a heavier weight.
Mine's showing up at all the same weight.
Did you specifically style your H3s in any way?
I don't.
You have H3s, right?
Yes.
Did you load different weight? Well, that shouldn't work. Shouldn't matter. Do I have an H1? Oh, I do have an H1. Yep. So they're not bold or anything. Does the font that you picked, all of it's bold?
I did the same when I was doing Open Sans with like the different weights too. Alright.
Just keep working. Let me finish with what we're doing, and then I'll come around and help those edge cases. Okay, so so a few things. So yeah, I'm baffled that not having that link in there in the HTML still makes the fonts work. Is that working for everybody else too? If you take out that link, your fonts still load. Makes me want to try something really weird. I know I don't have Pacifico, so I'm gonna just come over here and add Pacifico and see what happens. There we go. Pacific. Indie flower. I feel like it's running out and grabbing it. Nope. Alright, well, okay. Now I feel dumb because I know that I have all these fonts installed because you can download all these fonts. They have a GitHub repository. But yeah, that's so weird. I turned off Wi-Fi and it's still working. All right, I'll figure it out and I'll let you guys know. But that's gonna be a puzzle for me today. Well, okay, it definitely needs to be in your CSS. Okay. So the next thing you need to do is play around with the margin. Remember, if we inspect and grab our targeter once it loads here. All right, grab our targeter, kind of move over. You can see what sort of margin or padding that this element has applied. Margin generally shows up as orange. Blue is the element itself. Green is padding. Those are pretty common across most major browsers. Coloration. So I can see here that this H1 has a bunch of margin top and bottom. You can see if you scroll over here on the sides, there's a user agent style sheet. It's locked because you're not able to edit it. Font size is 1.5 M's. So this M, this refers to the element, the parent element. Okay, this is 1.5 times the font size of the parent element. Remember, we set that font size to be 16 pixels by default on the body. Okay, so the font size is one of those things that is inherited down all through the children. All right, so from the very first parent that has a setting set down through all the children, this font size is inherited. So this 1.5 M's, this is just 150% of whatever the parent element's font size is. And the parent element is getting its font size from its parent, etc., until it finds the body, in our case, which has something set. So you can adjust that. There are two different ways to play with this font size. Okay, it's proportional font. It's not really responsive because it doesn't change according to the browser, but it's proportional. It changes according to other fonts around it. There's M's, which refer to the parent element, and then there's Rems, which refer to the root element. So it goes all the way down to the body. It says whatever the body's default font size is, be 1.5 times this. Does that make sense to everybody? Rems versus M's. I rarely use M's. I would much rather use Rems. I have more control over it. It just makes sense. It makes more sense to me to use Rems. Anymore, I use viewport width more than anything else. But there's definitely like for body copy, there's a font size you don't want to go below, and that's usually going to be 16 pixels. Unintuitively, you actually a best practice is to increase your font size as your screen gets smaller. Okay, so if you're well, generally only for your body copy. So if you have a chunk of stuff you want people to read, like this, as your screen gets smaller, you actually want to make it a little bit bigger, because bigger text is easier to read on the phone. There's less space, so for some reason it's bigger. You know, making it bigger is just more comfortable. So anyway, I'm going to make this pretty large and add some more margin at the top and get rid of some of the margin on the bottom. So I know I need to target that H1. Luckily, I already have a little declaration block for that guy already. So I'm going to say font size. Let's go 3% of viewport width. So if I go back and look at that, makes it a little bit bigger. We're going to make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's go 6% viewport width. Yeah. Then we're going to get rid of our margin. So we can do top and bottom at the same time. It's good practice to just get used to writing everything in all the margin in one line instead of doing like margin top, margin bottom, margin left, margin right, right? Just do everything in one line. First, you can set 4 values. First value is top, right. The second is right. Third is bottom. Fourth is left. It goes clockwise. Starts at the top and goes clockwise. Okay. So margin top, we're gonna make. Let's go. I kind of like where it is actually. We'll say auto. Margin right, we're gonna go 0. Margin bottom is the one we're gonna mess with, and we're gonna tighten it up a little bit. So we'll go. This is where I would use Rems. So I'm thinking 16 pixels is my default. That's probably about 60 pixels. So let's go 1.5, which would be 24 pixels. Or you could go 1.75, which would be 30 pixels. Well, 28 pixels. So 1.75 rem, and then 0. All right. So what I've done is I've set auto for the top, so it'll be whatever the default margin is for the top. Okay. 0 for the right. I don't want to add any margin on the right. 1.75 rems for the bottom, going off of my 16 pixels that I set up here. So if you want to, 16 times 1.75 is 28. 8.9. You could probably get to 30, like 8.5, 6, 8.7, 8.8, 8.7, 7.8, 8.7, 8. Oh, yeah, I got it. 1.875. Oh yeah, that'd be 3/8 or 7/8. 1.875 would get us right at 30. So let's actually do that. 1.875, and then 0 for left. Load it. Tightens this up a little bit too much. Oh, the auto took it away. All right, so let's go. Let's just go. 16, 3.75. So we'll go 3.75 rem. Okay, there we go. Pushes it down a little bit more. I'm kind of okay with the space here. Kinda. Yeah, it's fine. Look at it here. It's fine. The next thing I want to do is, oops, adjust the margin up there at the top for my P tag, my paragraph tag under section first section. See how it has a little margin? We want to get rid of that. So we'll set it. We'll just be margin 0. So down here under first section P, margin 0 for the top. We can just set margin 0 for everything right now. Tightens up. If you want to, it's not a bad stylistic thing to make this font size a little bigger so that it kind of fills the space a little bit more and stands out from the rest of these sections. So you could font size. I'd go off of rems for these. Headers I'm okay doing viewport width because it's good for the header to scale with the screen. But for text you're actually going to read, you want to keep that in a non-responsive yet still proportional font unit, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're not using any percentage-based units. We're just using a unit that refers to like an actual pixel number, a discrete number. So in this case, font size 16 is our default. So let's go like 1.25 bigger. So 1.25 rem. Yeah, doesn't look too bad. Can maybe go a little smaller. I don't know, I don't mind that. I'd maybe break it up into 2 paragraphs though. Here. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at it going, that's a big chunk of stuff to read. Maybe we should break it up into smaller chunks. So I'm thinking, right, this where it starts with nevertheless makes sense to have another paragraph there. So I'm gonna just hitting enter isn't gonna do it. You actually just need to break it up into p tags here. All right. So I interjected that spacing. Hit return. Oh, right. That broke that. Oh, that'll break your display if you do that. So I need to wrap it real quick. If you come across that, you just need to then stick. Let's go. I'm just giving it an ID for later in case I want to mess with it. Why is that not working? Interesting. All right. So I wrapped it in a div, so then now I'm back to my three siblings here. So my display flex will work correctly again, or not. Oh, because I didn't give it a width. So disk P needs a width. Just a sec. Let's fix that. Let's go disk P width 48%. Then you can change this to be 100% of its parent. There we go. That gets us back where we want. I'm going to add a little margin there at the bottom. Disk P, so like disk PP, or first section P, we could do this. Margin top is 0, margin right 0, margin bottom, we'll go 1 rem, and left 0. That gets us some space there. So all I did was try to get back to the same number of siblings that I had when I first set up our display flex settings for that section. But inside of that disk P, you still need to specify width for that sibling. And then I just have my 2 paragraph sections in here. And that was all to just break that up a little bit so it wasn't such a giant block of text. It makes it a little easier to read. If you keep your paragraph chunks between 5 and 6 lines, that's really digestible for most people. And then the most comfortable column width to read is actually 73 characters, I think. Like, to try not to go wider than 73 characters. It's difficult to judge, but like at this font size, this is pretty close. I would say like a column like here would be pretty good. Down smaller, like this would be good at like 4 columns across. We don't have enough text for 4 columns, of course, but this would work. There is a really easy way to do columns in a paragraph tag. There's actually a column setting in CSS3 now, which makes it really simple. So none of this has enough text. If you have any sections down here that have a ton of text, by all means you can break it up into columns, and that would work. But for what we're doing, we don't need to worry about it. So on first section is more or less styled. I'm going to add a bit of margin to bump description down a little bit more. So I think what we'll do is maybe target all of our sections. That way we can keep the amount of space between each one consistent. So we're just going to come down here and say section. We'll go margin 0 for the top, because we just want to push down on the bottom. We want the bottom to push the other sections away. 0 for the right, and we'll go like, start with 1.5 rems here, and then 0 for left and right, or left. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit more than that. Let's go 2.5. If you're ever doing spacing, and you're getting annoyed with having to jump back and forth between Atom and your browser and Atom and your browser, once you have a setting written down, like here I have that margin setting on my sections now. Just inspect in your browser, find one of those sections, and you'll see you'll find that display block or declaration block. It's right here. Okay. When I inspect, I can come edit it. So I can say like 3 rems, and then that'll start to show me what it looks like. That's a bit more space, which is a little nicer to look at. It breaks them up cleanly. So 3 rems, that looks good. If you're editing it here, it's not saving it to your actual code. Okay, this is just in the browser so that you can try things out. So whatever you set over here, you're going to want to come back here and keep it. So what I'm saying with that is try not to make a ton of changes in the browser live, right? Without recording them, because it's not going to remember them. I've done that where I've just been like trying to debug a site and styling and working and making all these changes in the browser in the inspector, and then forget exactly what I changed, right? So that I have to refresh and go back, reload the page from the original code, and then try to rebuild all the changes that I made. It was really frustrating because I got it like right where I wanted it to be, and then didn't keep it all. And you can't just like go through and copy the CSS and paste it over there. That becomes a mess. You don't know what you changed, especially when you have thousands of lines of CSS. So okay. So let's reload it. All right. So we've got some spacing. It's a bit better. If you want to, you could make these font sizes a little larger. I still feel like this spacing right here is a little annoying. Also, there's no super clear indication of sectioning other than the spacing. At this point, it becomes like your aesthetic preference, right? You could lots of different things we could do. Let's target our H3s. So I'm going to say H3 margin 0 for the top, 0 for right and left. Let's go bottom. Let's go 1. I'm going to go 0.75 rems. I'm just throwing something in there. All right, that's not enough. 0.5 rems. Save it. All right, let me see if I'm targeting the right thing here. Oh, okay, I am, but then if you see here, the paragraph is also adding a bunch here. So let's grab those p tags. Let's say I do have a first section p tag that I'm targeting up here. So if you don't want to override any of the settings that you've set up there, and I did set my margins, you need to be kind of specific about how you're targeting these other paragraph tags. So what you could do, you could give them all the same ID and target them that way, which is probably not a bad idea. Or you can change this declaration here, since it's the reason. So this first section ID is the same level as section, okay? And if I go down here and I say, section P, this is going to change the paragraph tags for all sections, any paragraph tag that's in a section, right? Which is going to override or at least conflict with this one. Because this is an ID, it might keep it because it's more specific. An ID is in order of specificity for targeting CSS, like what overrides what. An element is the most generic, most general. Okay, so that will always be overridden by a class, which will always be overridden by an ID. Does that make sense? All right. Yeah. So there's some, like, it seems like this should stick, but it might not. Like, some browsers will interpret it a little differently and it can cause bugs. So it's always really good to be very specific in how you're targeting elements. Okay, so we'll try it. We'll see if it works. So let's change margin bottom to 0.25 rem, or margin top, sorry. We can change the bottom too. All right, I'm gonna go back and change it. Hey, it did. It kept it. All right, cool. So it did ignore it, and it looks like the first section stuff applied up here. Yep, sweet. All right, so the ID overrode. So you can see it right here. Right, the ID declaration block overrode the element declaration. Cool. That might not always be the case, so if you do come across the bug, then you just need to be more specific in how you're declaring settings for something. All right, so that tightened that up quite a bit. That looks much better. So now it's oh yeah, let's style our references here. So really with our references, we're going to just use display flex to get them into 2 columns. I actually might try column. We'll see if column works. Can't remember. Oh, it's an ordered list. So let's actually use. I don't think an ordered list. I don't think columns are going to work on an ordered list. Could go check, but I'm going to try it just in case. Columns. Actually, columns. A column count. Column count 2. Column width 48%. Hey, it worked! Look at that. I'm really surprised that worked, to be honest. There was 4. 1, 2, 3. Is there not 4? There's 4. So where's my 4th one going? So it didn't do things exactly the way I wanted it to. Genetic divergence more tightly, blah, blah, blah. 9, 8 comparison. Oh, so notice that, so here's what happened. This is why you don't use it on an unordered list. So our numbers over here that are applied through the ordered list, like it's not anything we do, it's just something the ordered list does, it gets cut off or overridden over here. It's like there should be a 4 right here, when there's not. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is because of the way the column is working. I don't know if that would fix it if we gave it less space. Nope. Let's try 40. It's not even making it smaller, which is weird. 30%. Nope. Okay, so let's not use column, but we can use display flex. So ordered list, display flex, justify content space between, and then on the section, actually we'll just go OLLIs, list elements. This is where you'll say the width of the list elements should be 48% of the parent. And then we'll need to, we'll also need to do flex wrap. Flex wrap, just in case. Actually, we don't need to do that for that. This is going to make 4 separate columns, though. That's not what I want. Column would be the best thing to do for this. But we just, the list elements, the numbers aren't showing up. Yeah, that makes 4 separate ones, which is not what we want. Let's try column count 2. Does 4 still show up? That's so weird that it gets rid of that styling. It's a bug. All right, so now we're gonna Google something. Column. Column. There we go. Doesn't occur in Firefox. Occurs in Safari. Is there a div or on the all div with multiple columns instead of the all? Huh. It's padding. Oh, list style positions inside. All right, well, we'll try that. So we'll keep this. Is it for the list elements? No, it's just for that. So if you come across issues like this where something should be working, Google it. Stack Overflow is one of the best places in the world to have questions answered on all sorts of different things. If you've never used Stack before, they have all sorts of different subsites for lots of different. There's a Photoshop Stack Overflow, right? Which is really useful. What was it? List style position. Style position. No, not type. Position inside. So by default, they must be outside. Let's see what happens when we change them to inside. All right, so they're there still. It puts it inside of the column, so it must be padding that is kind of messing with that. If you would prefer they stay outside, you can try playing with padding. I don't know if that's going to be, it might be on the actual, so padding 0, let's see what that does. Nope, still got rid of it. Column width 48%. Yeah, okay, let's keep them on the inside. There is what that other user was saying to do is like wrap this in a div, so we could try that. An ID of ordered list. Oops. This is just trying things to see if I can get them to mark that up now. If I can get it to style the way I want it to. Ordered list, columns, column count 2. Hey, that works. Sweet. Ordered list, well, padding 0. Not what I wanted. Let's try margin 0. Yeah, okay, sweet. All right, so wrapping it in a div, and then applying column count to that div gets the list elements to show up with the numbers in the margin, which makes it easier to scan through and find the ones you want. But they are still they're packed quite a bit yet. So like, there's no spacing between the different numbers, which is just the list elements themselves. So add some padding to the bottom of the list element. So you could just go, I would go through the ID for the parent div. Padding bottom, let's go 0.75 rem. There. It's nice spacing. So what it'll do is, with columns, the more you add, what it's doing is it's just trying to fill the first column, like it's trying to balance the two out as much as possible, so it keeps track of the characters and then just tries to split them as evenly as possible. So if we add more, like if I just arbitrarily copy these list elements and paste them in there, save that, refresh. See, it'll extend the height of my column out as much as I need it to, and it just tries to keep the columns balanced. Yeah.
So if you want to like bump one of the numbers over, would you just use a line break then?
Never use a line break.
Yeah, but then it's like that would just mess it all up because that's like counting with the characters.
Right.
So
Right.
what would you do with that?
Like if I wanted 9 to go over, there might be a setting inside column itself that would do that.
Okay.
But that's where I would check first. I'd always be really wary of trying to like arbitrarily move things around with padding. Never use line breaks in the HTML because that conflicts with CSS and that can cause all sorts of weird spacing bugs. What I would do is find the actual setting or characteristic that you're using, like in our case columns, and see if there's something they built into that. There might be. Google's also so like CSS column line. You're probably going to end up using columns a lot. It used to be you had to do it with display flex, but then you had to like arbitrarily pick the text that you wanted to move over. That's how I used to do it. Like when I would build sites that had lots of text that I would stick in the columns, I would just sort of myself decide how I wanted stuff to move over and break those up into little paragraph sections and then apply flex to the paragraph sections to move them horizontally, which does the same thing. It's just not as easy as column is. Yeah, so declare column count, width, declare both. Count, bottom, font line height. Maybe mess with your line height? I don't know.
Sorry, it's like a random question.
No, it's a good question.
Sometimes in InDesign where it's like
Right. Do you know what it's called in InDesign when it bumps it over?
sometimes I just hyphenate just as like.
Okay.
That doesn't really work for like the stuff like that. I don't know how to get it. And there might be a setting where you can use it to the start of a number, maybe.
Oh, possibly.
Yeah, but I would have to.
I'd have to do more digging. It's going to be a matter of like deciding or trying to figure out what the right search query is, like what's the right thing to ask about. Oh, you could do, well, that's just the gutter between the columns, column gap. Column rule, add a vertical line between, nope, that's not what I want.
Oh, is there a gap up there?
Yeah, gap is just the space in between though. Oh, I see. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so to change how the content fills the column, declare column fill. Only available in Firefox. I don't know how old this article is. The height is added to the column element, behaves different than blah blah blah. Image demonstrates. Yeah, so this is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's try changing it to column fill auto. Don't know if it works in Safari right now. Nope. But let's try it in Chrome. Let's just reload the page. So this one looks fine. Like it broke it up evenly. Is it not doing that? Yeah, so it broke it. So it works in Chrome. See how it broke that up pretty evenly? Whereas in Safari, Safari it didn't at all. And then try Firefox.
Yeah, that's the only reason why.
Yeah, it does look weird. Like that's something that would bug me too. Okay. I don't really need help right now. Oh, that's not even working in Firefox for some reason. Like it's doing it all. Oh, it's filling them all and not going over. Oh, weird. So maybe Chrome is just not even applying it. Let me take it off. Yeah, Chrome is just making it work. Safari is not. And I'm not sure if it's like a spacing thing or what. Yeah, so this is one of the issues with using, and then this one does it right. So Safari is actually the one with the bug. This is one of the dangers of using like CSS that is pretty new, right? That hasn't, all the kinks haven't been worked out yet. You're going to end up with browsers handling it a little bit differently. Safari, they don't push as many updates to Safari as they do to Chrome and Firefox. So it could just be that in their next update they have that bug figured out. So what I would do is a rule of thumb. Well, sorry, I hate that phrase. A good rule, a best practice, is just to open up your 3 major browsers: Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. And if it's working in 2 of the 3, go with that solution. Right? As long as it's working in 2 of the 3, you're okay. Chrome would be the first one I would test it in because that's that's probably the most commonly used browser. But then Safari and Firefox are pretty close behind. Especially like Safari iOS, that's super common. So if it's really, really janky in Safari iOS, then at a responsive size in Safari, then you're gonna have problems. Make sense? You'll want to address that bug. Okay, that's like a good best practice for just addressing bugs. Like what to prioritize. Do I fix it or do I just move on? Right? Because you could fall down a rabbit hole of trying to fix something and spend like 6 hours trying to fix a tiny little bit of spacing. I've done it. That's my personality. So. All right? All right. Okay, so from here, it's really up to you what other styling you want to do. I'm going to add some background color, maybe, just the high. It's really high contrast right now. Stark white and black, which feels a little weird to me. But I would like everyone to try to get it as close as possible to this. Does anyone not have it anywhere near this right now?